I can say the prayer.
Okay.
Our dear kind Heavenly Father, we're so very grateful for this evening and the that we can work on our class and um, discuss the case that we read this week. We ask you to bless us with thy spirit that we may learn what we need to learn and um, be able to discuss this case and um, make wise comments and be able to add to the conversation. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, cool. So, um, so there's a quick synopsis of the case, and I can just read it. It says the case describes the dilemma of a founder and CEO, Aaron Kennedy, as he seeks to grow the company from within while balancing the pressures of other competitors trying to push their way into fast casual foods category. As they grow, they face the difficult decisions of how to meet the pace of the budding company while maintaining their culture. Um, so there are a couple questions that it starts with, and it kind of like talks about like what is the fast casual segment of like the food industry market. Did you guys understand that part?
Say that one more time.
So let me read it again so like what's the fast casual segment is what the question says.
I actually did that. I actually went fast casual today.
Nice.
I went to Chipotle. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a gift card, and fast casual is like where you order at a cash register, like a McDonald's, but you're seated in kind of like a dining area. So you have people like filling your drinks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be like a little bit higher end food than fast food, and it doesn't typically a fast casual doesn't have a drive through. But it's really crowded because you have like, well, there's like El Pollo Loco, Five Guys, Freddy's Frozen Custard, Panera Bread. There's like a lot of companies that are fast casual.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's kind of a trendy thing because usually a fast casual has good food and it's a little bit quicker than like a sit down restaurant. And usually, well, I shouldn't say it's less expensive, but it was freaking really expensive. What did I pay? I paid like $15 for a burrito with guacamole.
Oh wow.
Yeah, with a drink. So it was kind of expensive, but was that the whole question? Like, what is fast casual?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And something that I just noticed, like as I was researching for this case, I did try and like find a quote, and I felt like this was a little bit more relevant, so I could find some more outside information. And I
Mhm.
found that fast casual like really um like is a huge market that's growing. Like people like those businesses, like you said, Chipotle, Panera Bread, Zupas, like all these different like places are like popping up all over the place, and like that's where people want to go because you get like the convenience of a fast food place with like the nicer quality, better food,
Atmosphere. Yeah.
yeah, atmosphere
And
type.
I'd add to that definition that it's typically fresh food that's made to order and there you don't have to tip. So it's sort of that perfect happy medium between a sit down restaurant where you have to tip
Mhm.
and it's made to order, but um, you get all the convenience of a fast food restaurant, having
Yeah,
it done quickly.
yeah. Um, okay, so another question is like, what are some of the challenges this company, Noodles and Company, is facing in in what they're trying to do?
So I put that they were stuck between two options of either growing internally through opening more corporate stores at a slower pace or franchising their business model with a 7% royalty.
Mm-hmm.
So if they did the franchising, they could grow a lot more quickly. But it's kind of less profit because they're just taking a percentage. But it's a little bit less risk because they're not putting their own money on the table. These franchisees are, and they're just taking off a 7% royalty of their success. So, but there is some risk in that you can't control all the aspects of the business. So if they could make it into like a trashy looking restaurant, but you have a bunch of bad franchise owners and kind of lower the atmosphere and the brand.
Well, you still have control over that, but you'd have to stipulate all of those details in the franchise agreement.
Oh yeah.
So because that was one of the solutions to the downside to franchising is, like you're saying, you could lose. I forget the two words he used. The brand and the
culture, maybe.
Culture, yeah. You could sacrifice some of that, but as long as you stipulate it specifically in the franchise agreement, then it's not an issue because they have to comply or they don't get the franchise.
That's true. Yeah, I think that was like one of his biggest worries was like through it all, he had worked so hard to maintain this like culture of like it being about the customer. I feel like that was his whole like the customer is the reason we have this business. It's not because of the workers. It's not because of like what it is. It's because we have customers. And I think he like worked so hard in the stores that they had already made to maintain that. He was worried that like he wanted someone to be able to keep that, keep that going. So
yeah, I was thinking that one of the solutions too, or something that they need to implement to make sure that they don't lose it, aside from making sure, specifically detailing what they have to comply with to meet the standards and the quality and the culture and all of that. I think they need to set up some sort of a traveling management team that their whole job would be to go and make sure that every location is meeting all of the standards, and if they're not, then work with them to be. The benefit, one of the concerns that I remember reading was, as it's just expensive to open up more and more locations, and franchising relieves a lot of that stress because you're not responsible for all the day-to-day operational issues like employment or trying to find hiring and all of that, so they would have a little bit more capital to work with in creating sort of that that management team that would go and just make sure that everyone's complying and still upholding the culture and the quality of Noodles and Company.
I think kind of on a different note, I think also another problem was that like the market, just like with franchising and with like building a company so quickly, and the fact that there are so many fast casual like businesses popping up, like that competition was also creating that struggle of like keeping the uniqueness and like their integrity kind of thing, like keeping that whole thing together.
What separates them from everyone else. But in a way, that can actually work out to their benefit too, particularly when they're when they're competing with really big companies like Starbucks or Panera Bread, that are so well established. They're just massive organizations because they really can't compete with them in outbidding or securing property so much, but they can compete with them in continuing to really make sure that they focus on their culture and how it differentiates them from Starbucks or from Panera or, and in that way they can compete with anyone as long as they, like you're saying, stay true to what they started out being in the first place.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like I noticed, like with other businesses like Starbucks, they had, they're obviously like really successful, and then they had this like gigantic expansion, and it was like Starbucks was everywhere. And when you go from like 58 stores to, I think they were going to 300, you can almost like shoot yourself in the foot because it becomes like it becomes less cool if there's one on every corner.
Mm-hmm.
I think they kind of, one of the cool factors they have going for them is that it's sort of unique, and they can kind of lose that if they grow in the wrong way or don't, if they don't organize the way that they're spread out,
Mm-hmm.
And pay attention to all of those little details. Because as I was looking at the list too, Noodles and Company is the only one that's like them. Everyone else is either, there's a lot of Mexican ones, there are a lot of Chinese, what are they called again? Fast casual restaurants. But there really aren't any Italian based or not even Italian, because Noodles, there aren't any that are so culturally, or not culturally, but that offer so many types of food in one location. And I think if they really, really capitalize on that and emphasize that difference, because like when you go to Pei Wei, you're going to get some sort of Asian flair, right? Mm-hmm. Or Qdoba, it's going to be Mexican, and Noodles and Company is the only one that you could get either. You could get a variety of. You can get American, you can get, Italian, you can get Chinese flavored cuisine, flavored noodles, all in one place. And they're the only ones that do that. So they really do have a niche in the market. Yeah. If they just really pay attention to all of those little details that he did in the beginning, because I think they'll be fine.
Yeah. I've actually never been to a Noodles and Company. I was looking at their website and seeing this stuff. Have you guys ever been to one?
I have a couple times. It's actually really good.
Really?
Yeah.
I've been to one, but that's it. I mean, I've seen them around. I don't eat like out a lot, so I'm not a huge, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked it. I like the fact that they have healthy options. Like that, I think that's something that's big too. Like, at least for me, like I want to, like, I try to eat healthy. I'm not perfect at it, but like I think, and they even mentioned that in the article, like the fact that they want to bring out like the healthy food, like they have salads, they have like soups and different things like that. I think that draws another unique group of people to them.
I agree. And I like the fact that they've done a pretty good job at marketing to sort of that business casual during the day, lunch, for the lunch hours, and then more of that family or young adult market. in the evening lunch hour. They've done a really good job at that, at capturing exactly who they need to for both of their prime, serving hours, so that they don't have a lull. Because there are companies that, they might do great during the day, but you go at night and there's like it's ghost town. There's no one really there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's like very telling for a company if they can keep food hours like probably from like 11 is when they open to like 9 or 10 at night. Like if you can stay busy for the majority of that time, that's really where you're making money is during those hours,
I
Okay,
think
so
a lot of that had to do with their they learned fairly quickly, well, it took them a couple of years, but fairly quickly how important location was. And they need those locations that are a little more trendy, so that during the lunch hour they can attract all the business professionals, and then at dinner, if they're just like this little hole in the wall off the beaten path location, you're not going to attract as much what's that called? You're not going to attract as many people at night because they won't want to go out of their way to find them. They just want something that's near and quick, and for the most part.
Yeah.
Especially if they have families.
Yeah. I just like keep thinking, like right now, I was just talking to Greg about the area that I was living in, and like right now the area that I live in is so close to like so many different food places, and it's because like we live just down the street from like a bunch of like business buildings, and that's where all like you're saying that trendy like work hours, like there's a cheesecake factory just down the street, and there's like all these different places that are like like you can walk across the street from the work buildings to all these restaurants and things like that. And I totally agree. I think location is huge. So kind of taking a step back though, I don't know why this is just how the analysis, like the instructions led, but it kind of takes a step back and talks about like their early years. So just kind of thinking about that, like what was going wrong when they first, like other than what you mentioned, Gina, like what else was going wrong in their first like two business models? Like they were losing money for the first like 3 years.
I remember them talking about the details of the decorations, like what the place felt like, and even down to the color of the walls and the kind of plates they were using. And so all of those details matter. And so that was one of them. I'm trying to remember what else he said. There was a list of about 2 or 3 things. I'm trying to remember where it was in the reading. Oh, and they were also, that's when they also came up with that every guest, every bowl, every time. So just that consistency and quality of food also. And
yeah, I remember him saying like at the beginning of the thing that the quality was really bad. Like this is very good, and like you said, the atmosphere was kind of like not very well suited, and they weren't getting a lot of business. They didn't find out until like after they had opened a second store, and they got like some review in the newspaper saying that they were like a dud or something like that. So I think that's when they did that trip to Chicago, right?
Yeah. Another one he said they learned from was that they needed to pick the markets with the highest concentration of the attributes, and as the attributes that he was referencing were the demographics of the people that they're targeting. So the student and the young adults, the business the business professionals, and then mothers with stay-at-home moms and their kids were the third one, which was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Another thing it just mentions in the document that I have is like they had like kind of like what you were saying, they had a disconnect with customers. Like they didn't like just on that, like we talked about how at the end they had this like they could get the people for the lunch hour where it was like a trendy place to go. But they could also get like the families in. And I think like when they started marketing towards that, and like that's what they had to do. They had to market to get like hire the right people and to like get the people that were working there excited about it. And that way they started to connect the people to the customers. And I think that's just really important because in the food industry, like I've never worked in the food, like the actual like restaurant food, but I worked at Cold Stone for quite a few years. And like the customer is the most important part. Like my manager would always remind us of that. She would just be like, it doesn't matter if your stuff is good or not. It matters. I mean, it does matter, but like the customer, what they want is the most important thing. Because if you don't have customers, you don't have business. You don't have a business at all.
Yeah, and if they're not happy, they won't come back. Mm-hmm. And they won't recommend you or...
Yeah, especially for a small company like that doesn't have a bunch of employees, they really run a risk of alienating people before they even get going.
Mm-hmm.
Another problem I just found that I had marked was that there was an issue between, they didn't have enough management. And so they're like at any given store, they really only had one manager at the restaurant at a time. And they realized they really needed one to handle all the back, like the kitchen area, and then one to handle all of the dining area issues and needs and everything. And then as soon as they figured that out, and then emphasized the importance of their communication, then everything changed for them. But they needed, so his words were, this is on page 9, he was saying at the very, very last sentence of the last page, he was saying that they needed, they made a huge bet on the future to go with 4 managers and insist on coverage in both the front and the back house at all times. And that coverage allowed us to take care of both of our customers and the crew, and it paid off in double-digit sales growth. So that was a big problem that they figured out. It made a big difference.
Yeah, and I like how that goes on to like just talk about how the employees are also important. Like if you like, it sounds like those managers were being overworked too. Like it said they were working like 75 hours.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's a ton, like to be working. So I think it was a really smart, like they said it was a risky move, but I think it was a really smart move to give them that balance, and like it paid off. Like it paid off immediately too.
Yeah. And then they continued to do. They did a pretty good job, I thought, taking care of their staff, whether they're managers or not, with their bonus structure, and then I know he emphasized at one point, it was either at the very end or the beginning. Oh, it's right there. So right in the middle. where he talked about how they spent a lot of time playing together and working together to build to just build that camaraderie and that loyalty and that energy, you know, that you need to work well together. And then, and then I appreciate how I said on on page 10, it was kind of in the middle, that they treated all of their team members as a serious part of a serious business. So it didn't matter if they were, you know, the bus boys or girls, to be politically correct, but you know, it didn't matter what their job was. If they were, you know, if they were in the janitors, you know, just cleaning up after people, or if they were at the front of the office or the management. And I think that paid off for them.
I agree. I think it, like, when you do have like people like being a team, I feel like that's what they created. They created a team environment where everybody's invested in the company's future. Like, even giving them, I thought it was cool that they like gave them like share options.
Oh yeah.
Options, so they could, like, if the company does well, then you do well. Like, you get a bonus based off like how the company's doing. And I think that like just getting people invested in a cause, like everybody wants to be a part of something, and that's what they gave them. They gave them a chance to be a part of something. And I love that it talked about how like they had people that would just stay in the company, like they
forever.
Like they started out as like a high school job or like post high school job, and then like one girl ended up becoming a manager of the company, and like I'm sure like she loved it, and I'm sure like there are other stories like that too, because they created that environment where you could, like, you were a part of something bigger, you know?
Yeah, there was somewhere to go with that. Whether, even if you didn't want necessarily to, you know, someday be in management or anything, your pay would continue to increase. And so yeah, people felt like what they were doing mattered, and there were tangible appreciation that they could kind of hold on to, in terms, if nothing else, with pay raises and, you know, future opportunities. I agree with that.
Okay. I feel like we've talked about a lot of the questions, so I'm trying to figure out like where exactly to go. So I guess another thing that it asks about, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, just that like mantra of every guest, every bowl, every time. How do you think that like changed, like having that mantra, or what is the right word that I'm looking for?
Like a motto, or
yeah, like a motto, like how do you feel like that changed their views, I guess, or their, like how did that help their company like build momentum and continue that growth, I guess?
well, I think it gave everyone something. One, it's easy to remember, and so it kind of sticks, you know, in your head. But then two, it just very simply defined what kind of the overall goal is. And so even if you didn't necessarily remember every bullet point or all of the details that were maybe covered in like the employee handbook, you could definitely grasp the intent with every guest, every bowl, every time, and just the importance of, you know, kind of doing your best, however you want to define that in terms of your particular job responsibility. But it's pretty easy to apply that, I think.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I was just asking like how that motto, every guest, every bowl, every time, like how did that help their company?
Um, yeah, I think it like what hurts a lot of companies is, I mean, the reason why people don't like going to McDonald's and don't like going to a lot of these restaurants is because they have a bad experience with people that they go in there for. Like, I remember I saw one lady one time at McDonald's. She was like, um, she like jumped over the counter and went to the shake machine and like was like pissed. She was like mad because the lady didn't do it right, you know? So like
Oh,
you
you mean like the customer jumped over the counter,
yeah,
like into the back?
yeah.
Oh,
So I was like, oh my gosh, you know. So it's really I think your customer experience really defines, you know, like if you're going to get repeat customers or not, especially for something new that not a lot of people know about. Um, so it's that initial, like, you only get one chance to make a first impression. So if that first impression is bad, then you lost a lot of customers, you know. Um, so I think that just goes back to hiring people that have the idea of the culture and an idea of the quality or that they're trying to emulate, and finding the right people that kind of portray that a little bit. Because a lot of people just, you know, when you're working at a job like that, they hate it, you know, and they don't want to even act like they like working there, you know.
yeah.
Um, so I mean that's kind of tricky too. You gotta value your employees enough to pay them the right way and treat them the right way, so that they respect your company back. So
I think that ties into to um, towards the end of the case study, they were talking about one of the things that they were sort of debating or talking about were whether it was more important to be first to the market or best in the market, and kind of and that
Mm-hmm.
that mantra, every bowl, every now I can't remember what it is. Every bowl, every guest, every bowl, every time. Just sort of emphasizes that being best in the market is perhaps more important than now that kind of all of those fast casual restaurants are popping up and concepts are popping up all over the place. Now it isn't so important to be first in the market as much as just really standing out and being really good at whatever you're serving.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that was also like talking about location too, like being the first to market in a specific location. But I agree with you, Gina. I think it's so important. Like I think being the best in market is way more important than being first in market, especially in the food industry. Because like you all were, both of you were saying, like if you have a bad experience, just like Greg said, if you have a bad experience, like it's ruined. And you tell your friends that, you tell everybody that. And that's the way like those businesses, like they talked about how they did their marketing, like getting people hired and stuff. And then they never had, and like telling people about the company. And then they never had to do anything like spend more money on that because it's word of mouth that keeps it going. And so I think like if you have bad quality food, nobody's going to keep coming. Nobody's going to come back. And I think that's where best market is and then being first to market.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me, you have Barro's Pizza where you live, huh?
Oh, me?
Yeah. Don't tell
I
me you've
haven't
been
been.
to Barro's Pizza.
Nope.
Are you serious?
Sounds like you have some
That's the
exploring to do.
best.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's the best pizza you can get. And I've eaten pizza all over the place.
Is that like the one that's like super famous that everybody like it's like one of the best places in the world or in the country?
And you can only get it in Arizona. That's the horrible part.
What is it? What is it called?
Barro's,
Like,
Barros.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so good. They have one called a Kona pizza that has like I hate pineapple pizza. Like Hawaiian pizza is disgusting to me. But they have this one where they put like teriyaki sauce and chicken and pineapple and like onions and stuff.
So it has kind of an Asian flair.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's called a Kona
Hmm.
pizza. Oh,
Okay.
I miss that. I would drive back there just for that.
That's
Okay,
fun.
well,
Now you have something fun to kind of look forward to trying.
oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Their
People
lunch specials are really
tell me,
cheap too.
yeah. People tell me all the time like where like we need to go out to eat, and I swear there's so many places here to go out to eat. There's like tons of like Mexican restaurants, and
Yeah.
I've heard a little bit about like that
Barros. Have you heard of Chino Bandito?
Mm-mm.
How do you know about all these restaurants there?
I used to live there. Like Chino,
Oh.
you should on your computer right now. You should search up Chino Bandito.
Okay, I'll do it right after we're done.
It's Mexican and Chinese food mixed.
Oh, weird.
Doesn't sound good.
Oh, it's amazing.
That like reminds me of like my mission. They would always do like they would always have pizza and sushi together. Like all the places
Oh,
Oh,
pizza and sushi. Like it would be a pizza and sushi place. Like you wouldn't eat them together, but like you could get
like
both
the
of
Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried Chicken combo places. You have some.
Ugh.
exactly. But it was everywhere, and it wasn't like the same like franchise. It was just funny to me.
Mm.
Okay,
That is
sorry.
funny.
Super
We're talking about
Tangent.
brand, right?
Well, actually, that reminds me. So those restaurants that are combined like that have like two,
Fusion.
like Taco Bell and an Arby's, or Taco Bell and whatever,
Mhm.
an A&W or something. Would that be considered a joint venture partnership?
I'm
'Cause
not
you know
sure.
how
I know it has
they were talking about they basically had three different growth strategies. They could either do a
I-
joint venture or a strategic partner or franchise.
Mhm.
But I wasn't really
Right.
sure what either one of the other two were.
I think like what they were talking about was more like a Starbucks, Barnes and Noble,
Oh,
like that's kind of like
or like a
well that's
Walmart. How some
the
Walmarts have
examples
like
that they
McDonald's in
mentioned,
them or
like
something.
Starbucks, Barnes and Noble, and then they also talked about like going into airports.
Okay.
I think that would be like the same thing if they went with another company that worked well with them. I just don't know like another food company that would be good with
Noodles
like a
and
new
company.
food
Yeah.
company. Maybe like some sort of bread
Or
company.
dessert. A frozen
Yeah.
yogurt shop or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, like I think that was kind of more where they were going with it was like airports. That's kind of what I figured. Like I feel like they wouldn't really do a Barnes and Noble type thing because that's
Yeah.
more like coffee, tea, hot chocolate, that kind of stuff
Mhm.
with your book that you're reading. But yeah, I get what you're saying. So do you guys have any other like, so I guess we kind of talked about all their different growth strategies. What would you guys do in that situation?
Well, I would definitely franchise.
Yeah.
I think they talked about their plan was to franchise 50% of all of their new developments, which I thought was sounded like a pretty sound strategy, because they would still have at least half of the stores, the new stores opening, would be totally within their control. And then the other half is, they could just really make sure that they had an awesome franchise agreement, and then to make sure that they, all of the locations are, the same, so they don't lose their brand recognition and their culture. But I liked that that they still kept a good portion of it, because they could have they could have, they could easily franchise the majority of them and then only keep maybe 25% or, whatever. But they're not, it sounded like they're really not greedy, and they're not trying to go gangbusters in so much as they just want to meet their own growth goals. They're not trying to like take everybody else out of the market altogether or, kind of dominate. But they're sounded like they're really being thoughtful about how they're going to go about doing that.
And I don't think they really have a competition because, like you said, there's no other noodle companies. There's no other like noodle restaurants. It's all like, I don't know. There's still no noodle restaurants. That's why I thought it was kind of unique because I had never heard of something like that before. And so I don't think they have a real competition. The only competition they have is just other restaurants, period.
Yeah.
So they kind of have that going for them. So I think if they were to franchise, they have to like create an out of the box concept that leaves little change for the entrepreneurs. So there's no room for error really. And I think if the more you monetize and the more you streamline the process and make everything simple and easy to do out of the box, the less you have to worry about as far as them messing something up.
Well, and honestly, I would think that as a franchisor, as someone who would go in and to, want the franchise, the more that everything is sort of spelled out for you too, just guarantees higher brand recognition, more. I mean, it's a win for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I think it simplifies everything. Because you want them to be streamlined. You want them to be all the same so that you're not just starting from scratch. That's why you franchise.
Yeah, it's definitely less risk to do the franchising.
Yeah. Trying to see if there's any other problems other than the only other thing that I remember reading was one of the other issues was they were talking about when you first open a store, there are kind of those three things that can really make or break a restaurant. And one of them was, so there were labor costs, and then, the location, and then food costs. And then he went in to talk about how difficult it is to balance, when to buy food, because it's all fresh. Because it's all fresh, it's not like you can make these purchases and just throw them in the freezer until you need them. You really have to time it all really well so that there's as little waste as possible. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that would be more of a science than really anything else. And the more that they could share all of that information with the people that are opening up the new stores, whether it be in-house or franchise through one of the franchise opportunities, the better too for everyone.
Or they could just like sell out to Barro's Pizza and just sell that.
I also think that like something that they said in the case was like they kind of wanted to keep that like 50-50, like the stores that they already had, they wanted to keep those company owned and then like franchise from like their like continue to franchise but keep it like a 50-50, like 50% franchise, 50% our own stores.
Yeah.
So I think that helps them just kind of keep like that way the company's still over those stores and those places. And I think that was something that like I think that would be like a good idea to like make sure that as you're growing you continue maybe even like not as at as quickly of a pace. Like they still are adding on corporate, like their corporate stores.
I think you bring up a good point too, because keeping 50% of the stores in-house too, they're still really taking care of those original investors and the people who really put their necks out to get it going in the first place. And if they just if they just went public with everything, they would lose a lot of that the ability, I guess, to monitor and moderate how much they wanted to pay back, in dividends and shares. There's a word for it, but do you know what I'm talking about?
Kind of.
When a company is public.
Oh, yeah. Just like a publicly traded company.
Right. Well, it changes the payout structure for all of your investors, because you don't have that sole control over it anymore. All of it goes collectively to the shareholders, the majority, right?
Right. You're paying.
So keeping 50% of it in-house, they can still decide, okay, this quarter we're going to give, however much X amount of dollars back to the original investors, instead of keeping it or whatever. Mm-hmm. So anyway, it's smart because they still retain a lot of the control over the company, but without having so much of the risk or needing to raise so much more capital to be able to open up more locations and stuff. Because it sounded like they've gone kind of as far as they could go, and going with the bank loan options and seeking out personal investors. They've kind of gone as far as they felt like they could sort of go in that direction. So
I think too, I could be wrong, but I think when you go public and have an initial public offering, you can release only a certain amount of shares for people to buy. So if you want to keep in control, you can only release a certain number of shares out there to be purchased so that you always retain control. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think a good idea too would be if they're franchising out a bunch of businesses, if they had like at least a corporately owned store in each one of those areas that could oversee the franchisees and make sure that they're kind of following suit. That way they can.
That's why I think they should have a whole different department or management, some sort of team that would their sole purpose would be to monitor all of the locations, not just the franchised ones, but all of them, and just make sure that they're all living up to their defined culture and their expectations. I was going to ask though, do you guys know if in a franchise, do they, so like with a franchise, from what I understand, everything, all of the income or whatever for the most part, with the exception of the percent that would go back to, Noodles and Company, it goes to the owners of the franchise, right?
Yeah.
So like all of those shares and all of that would be that wouldn't be in Noodles and Company control necessarily.
Right. So my understanding the way a franchise works is you pay an upfront fee to open your own branch. So usually it's between like $50,000 to $150,000, like a Taco Bell or something. You could with, and then you pay that up front to Noodles and Company to just license their brand, license their stuff. And they usually send you like an operational plan. So they'll send you like, this is where you order stuff, and this is where you get all of the plates and stuff like that. And sometimes they'll actually, like, depending on the offer, they'll give you all that stuff to start up and give you the stuff to design your store to make it look like the store. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they just take an annual, and I think the annual rate is based on what from the PDF or the case study said between like, what did they say, 0 and 15%, and the average was 7%.
I think I remember reading that Noodles and Company's was 5.
5.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like with just franchises in general. Mm-hmm. An average of, I think the average of the industry was 7. Mm. But yeah, it's nice because you kind of have a plan spelled out for you. You don't have to like figure out what works. You already have something that people know and are familiar with.
Yeah.
So, but it's expensive.
Sorry, are you done?
No, give me about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I was just, in my experience, when I did work at Cold Stone is a franchise. Mm-hmm. And so I worked for 2 different like owners. Like I worked in Utah and in Rexburg as well. And like that's another like what you were saying, like they take the money and they can
use it however they want.
Yeah, basically. But also like they had different things that they had to like do. Like you were saying, Greg, like they design it the way like to match the brand and everything. But also like for us, like there are a lot of seasonal ice creams. So like throughout the seasons you had to like follow the corporate's like plan.
Signage and everything.
Like, you had to have like the seasonal flavors, you had to have like the advertisements for them, and you had to change your advertisements accordingly. So I think they still have some control within branding, but I feel like what you were saying, they don't always have that same control with like, they're not getting that money back, mm-hmm. except for the whatever percentage.
Yeah, like, and royalties.
Yeah. And another thing is they can like, both the stores that I worked at, one of them had like the one in Rexburg, he owned 2 stores. So he owned Rexburg and he owned Idaho Falls. And so that's another thing that they can do is that you can open, like you can have multiple stores and then like put management over that. And so it's kind of like you're starting your own business in a way as a franchise. It's like basically an opportunity for them to start their own business. And I do know that like they came down here to Arizona to get trained to open a Cold Stone. Like they had to go through training basically to fit the brand, to know how to do things right and things like that.
That's interesting.
So
yeah, I'm sure it must pay well, because if you can make like, instead of investing that money, mm-hmm. Into like a mutual fund or something, if you can make more than that off and still pay a royalty to the owner, it's got to be well worth it. If people are doing it, like that's why there's so many restaurants everywhere.
Yeah.
I wonder what the rate of return is on like an average store.
Yeah. But it totally depends on location.
Yeah.
Just like everything else. I mean, if you have a really good location.
Yeah. Like that not Quiznos. Where did I go this morning?
Qdoba.
No,
Chipotle.
Didn't you say Chipotle?
Chipotle, yeah. Quiznos. Yeah, it was like the line was literally out the door. People were holding the door open, walking in. Like, it's insane. So if I ever get like, $80,000, I might buy
Go open up your own hand.
one.
I just would never want to do that. I just don't like. I've seen how like that was their job.
It's a
The
lot
people
of
that
work.
owned the Cold Stone, like that's all they did basically was run a Cold Stone.
Mhm.
So, I mean, yeah, it would be like an experience, but for me, I'm good. I'd rather just invest in the mutual fund.
That's funny. I worked for a franchise New Balance shoes store.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was kind of interesting to see like there's certain rules they had to follow with signage and all that. But it was like their own little business, so it was kind of laxed on HR policies and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Okay, well, just to kind of finish up, didn't any of you guys like look up what happened to Noodles and Company? Like what's kind of been in the recent news with them and how they've been doing since the case study?
I haven't. But they just opened one down the street from us, so they must be doing fairly well.
Yeah, so I'm not like 100% sure. It just says to look some stuff up, and I didn't have time to do this beforehand, but I kind of like just Googled it real quick.
Mhm.
Um, and it like from what I've seen, they are publicly traded now, so they have like stocks and everything. And their stock wasn't doing very well,
Oh, that's not good.
but and they've had like a couple of like trades in management. I guess just in July, um, their chairman stepped down, and just like different things like that. So I know they haven't been doing like amazing. Um, like they have been slowing their growth, I guess, is kind of what all the articles like in the at least in the first like Google page, it kind of just said that like they're kind of slowing, like they haven't had the best
Hmm.
orders, but I think they've grown a lot. Like they have franchised, they have um like I said, become publicly traded. So, I mean, they've grown, but as of recent, they've kind of lost that growth. I wish they would like give us like
I wonder how that compares to all of the other, what is it, fast casual restaurants. If it's sort of an industry lull right now, if all of them are sort of dropping in their stocks or anything, or if it really is just them.
um that's a good question.
Their Craigslist, I don't know how accurate this is, but their Craigslist page says they have 410 locations.
Wow,
Okay.
that's a lot because how many did they have here? 60?
58.
58.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot of growth.
Okay. Oh, here's another thing. It says this is from 2000. This is from April. It says um they had to like impair 39 stores last year.
They had to what?
Impair? It sounds like they closed those stores. Or like like maybe not close them, but they had to like
Really down limit like our
yeah,
operating hours or
yeah. And they closed like 16 stores. So while like I think it's exactly what you're saying, they have like 400 and something restaurants. Like so they grew a ton, it sounds like, but now they've completely they're kind of like this past like these past couple years like 2015 2016 have not been great years for them.
yeah. Sounds like they might have grown too fast. Like Greg
Yeah.
was saying, that there's always that tricky balance and growth is good, and you need to always be trying to grow. But if you do it too fast.
You know what I'm noticing too is I look at their map, is they're like in certain locations. Like the closest one to me is in San Jose, and there's 4 other ones in San Jose.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Wasn't that one of their strategy objectives to not do that? I thought I remember reading somewhere that they were saying they wanted to like the key they felt to growth was to really find diverse locations.
That's what I thought too.
So that's interesting that they kind of they seem to.
I wonder if that's another like franchise thing though. Maybe like because one person started it, like maybe
Yeah.
they started 2 stores and then someone saw how successful they were being there.
Oh yeah, that's true. Huh?
So I
Yeah.
wonder if that's just kind of like what something that comes with franchising is they kind of have those locations.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in
You would
Sacramento,
think that
there's
they would put that in their agreement, that they would have some control over where, or maybe not control, but input at least into where that they could open up franchises. Because I would think that they can't just it would just be so foolish to just say, okay, just give me the money for the franchise and you can, kind of do whatever you want, go wherever you want.
yeah.
Seems like it would be to everyone's best interest to have a little more collaboration in that.
There's 7 of them in Sacramento.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
My closest one is 140 miles away.
I think another thing with that is like for me, I've noticed all the noodles and company, they're all in shopping centers. Like they're all by a mall or like a major shopping center.
Mm.
So I wonder if that's another thing. And I feel like they talked about that a little bit in the article. So I wonder if that's kind of like they just tried to get in as many malls and stores as possible.
I wonder if they ended up sort of being the second best option because they would not be able to compete financially with bigger companies that would want, say, the corner, property, real estate, more. So I wonder if that ended up being sort of the next best option.
Mm-hmm.
Properties that they could end up with. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you know? There's one right by the New Balance store I worked at.
There you go. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming, guys. We're about pretty much out of time. I think we're a little bit over. So, any last comments or anything you guys want to add?
Nope. Thank you. Thanks for leading this.
No problem. Thanks for joining us and see you guys next week. Do we want to do Wednesday or Thursday?
Can we do Thursday again?
Yeah.
Sure. Same time, 7:30?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
Oh,
that
good.
is that. Oh no, that would be you, Greg. Right? You would be leading that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Need it.
Okay. Cool.
Great. Sounds good. See you guys next Thursday.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.